Welcome to the Strangers on the Way podcast. I am so excited to introduce you to Greg Fischer, Dr. Greg Fischer. He just recently completed his PhD in, is it marriage and family counseling therapy?
Marriage and family therapy, that's correct.
Marriage and family therapy. Amazing. And I met Greg in Kentucky at a work conference and just was so moved by how he loves people. I've gotten to know him a little bit, to hear his a little bit of his journey, and his heart. And I'm just moved by just the humility and the way he loves people, the way he sees people, and his passion for Jesus and the church. And so, really excited. Greg, would you like to just introduce yourself to listeners and share a little bit about who you are, and then we'll dive right in.
Yeah, well, I would actually love to start right there. What you said, that you notice how I love people. That means a lot to me, because even what we were just chatting about, I think that right there, how we love people is essential to how we operate in the kingdom. So yeah, I just got my PhD and I'm about to start a job as a professor, and I'm thrilled. I'm so excited to do that. But and then I also work as a therapist, and so I work with a lot of different people. And I think the most important thing there is not, I'm going to botch the phrase, but it's something like, people don't care what you know, they remember how you make them feel. Or as you just said, like if they feel the love of God, I think that's the most important thing. And yeah, even as a therapist or as a teacher, as a professor, or whatever I might become, I want that to be predominant. Yeah, the love of God, because that's what changes people anyway.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
So, cool. I loved your introduction. That's awesome.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. I love that. I would love to ask, before we kind of get in, how have you been just captivated by the love of God? It sounds like, obviously, that's you can see very evidently a passion that you've received his love and you love others well out of that. But where did that start for you, just personally?
I think it started because he loved me first. To quote scripture. I grew up in church. I was very, very churchy, very much like I know my Bible. I know, yeah. And I was always, at least publicly, a really good kid, like the way I was raised, the way I acted. But what changed, I think, to answer your question, what really started changing that for me is when I really realized how much I need his grace, and really like my own mistakes and failures, and how desperate I am for the love of God. And then that makes you realize, well, it's there. He does love you that much. And then it's like that much more how much I want to share that with other people. Because it's life changing, And as I said earlier, that's the only thing that changes your life, is the love of God. And so that's why it's a simple.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I feel like when we are able to, I don't know, have an understanding of the grace, then we're able to extend it to others and actually love them as well. Because you're right, we all need it. And yeah, that's beautiful. Well, I know you have a passion for the church as well, and in the kingdom of God, which in today's society, it looks a bit, the church, I think, always is growing. But could you share just a little bit about, your heart for the church really being aligned with the kingdom of God, and maybe not some, other cultural things that are present in our society right now?
Yeah. So I used to work in ministry. I've been an evangelist. I've been a missionary. I've been a pastor. I've kind of done it all. And now I'm moving into, higher education at a Christian university. But even though I don't work or carry the title pastor anymore, I still have such a love for the church. Even though I have a lot of frustrations, as I think a lot in our generation do. To me, I am fierce but I'm not leaving this church. I'm a member of my church since oh, I don't even know, like 10 plus years. Um, and there were times, like some rough times, that I even stepped away for a minute. Like I didn't do it perfectly, but I keep coming back, and I stay so connected, not because I agree with them 100% theologically or in function, like even
Mm.
do, but because that's who I'm in a relationship with. That's my church family essentially, and I think that's what we should be drawn to, not this consumer driven, like let me pick out my church and like the kind of music I like and kind of teachings. And I mean, there's some of that, if you're looking for a church, like take that into consideration. But once I was here, uh I mean, I just, and that's my family. It's like it doesn't occur to me to leave. I even then still have pursued. I actually, just like I just got my PhD, I also just became a bishop, which in my denomination is a rank, so it's not like a position. But I became the third highest rank in our denomination. It's called our bishop. Um, and I don't need that for anything career wise. I really just felt like A, God was calling me to, but B, it's like I commit to this family, even in all our problems and dysfunctions. I
Yeah.
don't agree with them on everything, um, but I really love them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
As you were talking, I was just so in awe of the word commitment just kept popping into my head. Um, where did that come from? I think in our society, even in our generation, for those just listening, Greg, how old are you? 30,
36.
36. Okay, so millennial, right? We have been taught this kind of like just go with the flow, go where you want, like change it up. But there's this like commitment piece you can see in you. Where did that come from? And how did you learn to value that?
What a good question. Because yeah, I do find it kind of rare in our peer group.
Yeah,
Um, Commitment to church, particularly, and I know I use that word. I'm going to up it just a bit, even into the word covenant, um,
covenant.
which is obviously very biblical, very Old Testament.
Yeah.
The idea that, like, I mean, commitment or maybe contract has this connotation. It's like I'm getting something out of you, you're getting something out of me. That's our relationship. Yeah. Moving it into this place of like what a covenant kind of idea is like we are entering I mean, it's even sacred. It has a religious connotation, it has a spiritual connotation it is a committed relationship. um there's an intimate aspect involved. But it was just like I was talking, it's like I see my church as my family. It would never occur to me to like leave my family. Now, as a therapist, a marriage and family therapist, I am alarmed at how quickly, I see this in clients, I see this in students, how flippantly they want to cut off their actual family,
Mm.
let alone their church. That doesn't occur to them that they should stay committed or loyal to their church when conflict arises. And millennials, and I think Gen Z is honestly even worse. We don't
Yeah.
even know how to work through conflict because we have trained ourselves like, let's just leave.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is problematic in general. Like you're going to have a very lonely, very dysfunctional life if
Mm.
that is how you resolve conflict. We have to be able to work through conflict in our families, in our churches. Then even like the other point there is our relationships and marriages.
Mm-hmm.
That's really where I hammer the word. Let's move from commitment to even to covenant. That
Covenant.
idea of having to push to that. I'm kind of going off on a trail to answer your
No,
question
I
where
love
that came.
it.
Um, I saw a lack of it just in my generation in general. And I was like, and I went through it too. There were times I floated from church to church, and I didn't have the same level of conviction on that. And then I really uphold that from mentors of mine.
Mm.
Um, you and I have talked about Dr. Ricky Moore. I think he's been on your podcast, right?
Yep. Yep.
Um, the way he understands this kind of commitment. I mean, even probably these buzzwords I've already said, I probably pulled from him if I'm honest. But he really taught me over the years how much he loves and values a church, and we go to the same church.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just um, I've like decided, I chose to like be that way too. Um, there was a time in my life I'd really floated around a couple different ministries, churches, and I just said I just got to quit. Like I felt
Mm,
healthiness of it, and so I said this is, I just commit, and that was the current church I'm at, and I'm still committed. Um,
mm.
yeah, so no, I think that's a real value we need to get back.
Yeah, what do you think? It is interesting 'cause I want to press in a little bit. So like you are a marriage and family therapist, and I assume a lot of people that come to you, it's conflict in relationship or disconnect. So how do you help them work through it? I guess does the decision of covenant like have an impact in their ability to work through conflict, like making a decision like I'm going to stick with this person, so we're going to do what it takes, or like yeah, I guess how do you walk people through that? Have you seen like that being a piece in the process, I guess, if that makes sense?
Absolutely. Um, so I do want to answer these very cautiously,
Sure.
because there are some, particularly if we're talking about marriages, there are some marriages that say maybe even really unhealthy or physically
Yeah.
right, uh, abusive or whatever it is, and there are some times where people need to take care of themselves. I just kind of want that like
Yeah.
good. That being said, your question there, yes, a commitment to this kind of covenantal idea is such an asset in the therapy room. Um, when when I have a couple that is like that, they're just like, we're here to work through whatever we have to. I'm like that, and I've had it a few times. That is like, wow, it blows me away what they can accomplish.
Mhm. Wow. Just by making that decision.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, because, and that even gets into like marriage therapy when commitment is such an important piece, because what you're doing there with somebody is being vulnerable, and vulnerability always has risk. And the
Mm.
more you can trust that that person is committed to you, it just builds this beautiful, trusting kind of relationship. And honestly, it's what we're all seeking. We all have that wired in us.
Mm-hmm.
I even go so far as to like, I call out my clients sometimes. I'm like, maybe not, like I said, covenant can come with it, a kind of a religious connotation, and I wouldn't want to push that on my client. But
Mm-hmm.
if they are not committed, I kind of like, why are we in here? I don't want to waste your time and money. And I'm not gonna like, Jedi mind trick you, like convince you to like work. This comes from you. Like, I'd say to my client, like, this comes from you. It's a decision on your part that you want to right through this, whatever it may be. And if they're committed and that's a yes, like awesome, I'm here. Like I'm working with you. Like let's do it. Yeah. So I think absolutely uh, plays into therapy
Yeah.
for sure.
So powerful. And then the other thing you mentioned is like our generation and Gen Z, we kind of see conflict. I feel like this is the case even with like anxiety. There's like high levels of anxiety, and then we numb or run or, cut out. Where do you think that came from, and how do we change the culture or like give, I guess, yeah, does that make sense? Like, what are
Yep,
people afraid of, or how do you not do that?
for sure. Great question. The first thing I would do is on that question, I would refer you to a book called The Coddling of the American Mind by Jonathan Haidt. And it's Greg, ah, I forget his last name. It's a strange one. But it's a great book. And they essentially address that very question. And so I would say, where does that come from? Is a couple things. We didn't raise our kids, millennials, and then even more so Gen Z, I think, to handle conflict. We as the parents, I mean, I'm not a parent, but I guess we as a culture, we block them from it. So like, an example of, like when a little duckling is breaking out of an egg, like first hatching, um, they need that exercise, like to practice and to stretch their muscles. They need that to survive. If
Mm.
any parent or anybody came to help them and like, oh, let me break this egg open for you, they would not make it.
Mm.
And it's the same kind of thing that we've done to our kids. Like, oh, we don't want them to be offended. We don't want them to be scared or trigger their anxiety. We have gone overboard on that to where we're
Mm.
not developing kids into adults that know how to handle conflict or anxiety or any of these things. Um, so Gen Z in particular, I think, let me get this right, they entered college around 2014 maybe, and they
Mm-hmm.
entered school around 2017, 2018, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I saw the difference. All of a sudden entering grad school, because that's mainly what I teach. Um,
Sure.
these students, like a test, it had such an anxiety to them, like they could not handle it.
Wow.
And a test is a normal part of like school. But they have been so coddled, to borrow their word, that
Mm.
they how to handle it. So that's part of where it comes from. I think the
Sure.
other part is our culture. Then the idea of offense is like the cardinal sin right now. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, offensive is the the trump card shut down. Like you can't say that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, particularly in academia, like we have to have ideas, and the ideas, to be able to risk ideas being offensive is essential to like healthy dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
But always navigate. Like, I don't want to offend anybody. Like we're not going to get anything accomplished. So I think that's another place it comes from. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, those are kind of I guess, the beginnings of it. Beyond that, it's only grown and been encouraged because I mean, it's downright celebrated.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do hope more and more people are like, oh, this isn't exactly healthy, and that we can venture in, not to offend just for the sake of offense. Like that's not going
Yeah.
to be fun for everybody, but we to get at the truth, we have to be able to risk being offensive. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. That's so
Did that?
good. Yes. No, it's fascinating. How do you teach people a new way?
Great question. I don't think I've done it. I've always done it well. Um, I think comes back to, if it's a student, if I'm thinking about, as a professor, as a student, they have to know that the bottom line, I love and care for them.
Yeah.
If they know that, I think that can build a little trust to where even if I'm pushing them, or if they're a little uncomfortable or a little offended, they know it's because and maybe I'm not doing it perfectly, but at least my intention is I'm trying to do what's best for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's best for them in the long run is develop those skills. Um, Particularly, if I'm training therapists, like therapy 101, you're going to be offended sometime. Like you're dealing with clients, dealing with emotional stuff. Like you can't you can't be like, oh, this is offensive, I shut down therapy. Like you have to be it.
Yeah.
So to train that, I certainly try. I don't know how successful I always am.
Yeah. No, that's so good. So good. Oh, this is fascinating. Um, I know that you're also passionate about, yeah, the church, the local church, and you live in Tennessee, so your
Yeah.
context is a little bit different. I'm up in Chicago, um, but how have you seen the need for the kingdom of God to play out in the church, in regards, Greg's really passionate about politics as well, and just how the kingdom is a bit different than our American politics. So could you share like a little bit of your heart about that too?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I am passionate about this. It's funny to say Greg's passionate about politics, because even that phrase, is, I don't think I'm passionate in the way so many people would take that phrase to mean.
Sure.
But it's not like I am really passionate. I get behind a candidate and I campaign and blah, blah, blah. What I'm passionate about is approaching everything in our lives, whether it's our jobs or academics or politics, that we approach with a truly kingdom perspective. Truly.
Mhm.
You mentioned Tennessee. Yeah, down here, the Bible Belt, very red, very Christian. And that right there, I think I think it's a mistake at how often around here we marry those two things.
Mm-hmm.
That Christian means you're Republican and Republican means you're Christian. I just don't think that's true, and I think that belief is very problematic. Um, so that's really what I'm passionate about. When you talk about passion about politics, I'm passionate about approaching them correctly with a kingdom mindset.
Yeah.
And that's not always, certainly not understood. It's certainly not accepted down here. A lot of the culture likes that we are predominantly red and Republican and patriotic and those kind of things. And I just have a different view on some of those things.
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's fair. You point out the regions. Yeah. The Bible Belt is something else. I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, which that growing up had somewhat of a different feel than down here, but I imagine Chicago does too.
Yes. Yeah. So what is like a kingdom way to look at it?
Well, I always say, I mean, vote for who you want to vote for. That does not offend me. Whoever you need, you feel, and I vote for who I want to vote for. I rarely say who that is.
Mm-hmm.
I want to endorse anybody,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it's that, like, kingdom first. I don't see Christ's instructions go into all the world and establish governments or pass legislation or anything like that. It's simply go into the world, make disciples.
Mm-hmm.
And it even goes further. I think you can pull out through Paul and the entire New Testament, go make disciples regardless of the environment you find yourself in, government or oppression or not, persecution or not. Yeah. And so, and I have a wide enough view. Some people, if they feel called to, and God's calling them to, fight for certain things in courts or certain, okay, I believe in that. I'm wide open enough for that. But let's not make that let me put it this way. A lot of the culture I know and the circles I'm in,
Mm-hmm.
have prayed for the overturning of Roe v. Wade for years,
Mm-hmm.
which, I support, and I'm glad that was overturned. But I don't think we should say mission accomplished. In
Mm.
fact, I would only say mission just barely begun, because we still have to help and love and reach and disciple all these people that are affected by that. And so that's kind of what I mean, is to think like our job is for laws and legislation, when no, our job is people.
Yeah.
That's what we have to remember.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What does healthy discipleship look like to you? I know, I think this is something, I don't know, in America, we've had at least I come from kind of a mega church context. And so discipleship, now that I'm learning a bit more about it, I'm like, oh, wow, this, when you're big, it's harder to do unless you're intentional about the small. Yeah. What does it look like to you in discipling people in the ways of Jesus?
Great question. Great question. Because that question itself, I don't think is asked well enough.
Hmm.
Or I think we set up a small group or blah, blah, and we're like, oh, we have discipleship. And I'm like, I think we need a larger emphasis on that.
Yeah.
I think what it looks like is it's going to come right back to the word commitment or covenant. It is
Hmm.
being in relationship with people and learning, even when it's like, I'm getting frustrated with you,
Yeah.
pushing past those kind of things. Yeah, I think there's a level of vulnerability has to be involved in discipleship. If we're just like, here's teaching this principle, but not really talking about, here's what I struggle with, here's where I messed up, those kind of conversations, then we're missing it.
Yeah.
Which, granted, I'm a therapist, so I'm like, we should all be vulnerable, I'm big on that, but I think that's essential.
Hmm.
um and vulnerability is kind of the therapeutic term. I would put it in the Christian context of confession.
Hmm.
Is particularly evangelicals, I don't know why we have ran from that. we are good at like, oh, when I was a sinner, I did this, now I'm saved. And then we have this concept that like we have to pretend we have everything together,
Yeah.
which isn't true for any of us. But it's also damaging because if you're pretending like that, I feel the pressure too. And so
Mm.
everyone, we need to take that mask off in the proper healthy places. I'm not talking about full exposure because that can be painful, but yeah, just to be real, like, yeah, I'm human and I make mistakes and I struggle with this. And that kind of conversation, I think, needs to come back in church in the right places, in small groups,
Mhm.
in one-on-one mentorships. And yeah, that would help a lot, I think, is a big piece of it.
Yeah. Are there intentional places you've plugged yourself into over the years that you've like you would attribute to just growth or helping you thrive in your faith or journey as a human even?
Yeah, so we mentioned earlier, Dr. Ricky Moore. He's like a mentor, spiritual father to me. I
Mhm.
sometimes I call him my Gandalf. Um,
I love that.
yeah, I love Lord of the Rings, but um, so we've had like an outside of structure relationship. Like we'll grab lunch, coffee, talk, but I also go to all the things within a structure. So he leads a Sunday school at my church. I go to that. He leads a prayer meeting. I go to that. Which is not only commitment to him, but commitment to our church.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, it's just walking and being in relationship with him. And that, I mean, I've known him, I think since 2009. So yeah, we're talking a long time, just getting to walk with him.
Yeah.
And he's great. We keep talking about him for your listeners. He is now retired, but he is a retired Old Testament theology professor. So
Mhm.
he knows the Bible and he knows God, man. He loves to walk with God.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes. Yes. He's on another episode so people can listen and meet him too.
for sure.
Um, what would you say? I do think something the church can bring, especially in this society that we live in, is that intergenerational connection, which you found so valuable. What would you say to younger listeners that are not feeling connected to community and are interested in going a little bit deeper? Like, how do they find it?
Yeah. You said advice to younger listeners. My first thing to them is I would say pursue a mentor. In fact,
Mm.
pursue several. I've talked about Ricky, Dr. Moore. He, is in my life as like a spiritual thing, kind of a spiritual voice. I also have mentors professionally, other other even kind of less formal, like we may not even use that term, but I have pursued that relationships with them. Some are professors of mine, some are just other people at my church, just because there's a wealth of wisdom, knowledge, experience, and just people who have served God longer than you have. Um, I have benefited so much from the people in my life that are like that just speak into me. And so to the younger listener, I know that can be intimidating, scary, all these things. I promise you, there are some in the older generation who would love to do that. If you cannot find anybody at your church, maybe that's time to find a new church,
Mm.
because I'm sure they're at your church. Somebody who would love to just pour into somebody.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
How do you, like, practically, like, so is it just someone you notice that they carry something that you see in them, or just like literally
Yeah,
brass tacks? How does this happen? I
yeah,
want to make it really practical.
absolutely. I would start with if you see someone who is doing what you want to do, and so that relates professionally. When I was pursuing to become a professor, I went and met with my professors. Like how do you get where you're doing what I want to do? How do you get there, kind of thing. So there's a
Mhm.
practically like career wise or job wise, but do the same thing spiritually or even just socially. If you're just like, wow, that guy like is really respected in our culture, in our little circles. He's got a good marriage. He raises kids right. I want to be like that. Like if that, just identify that and run after it. Um,
Mhm.
that's what I would say. Start there.
So good. So good. And I know you just completed your PhD and your topic was social media. I'd love to
Yeah.
talk a little bit about this because I do think this is like an element in kind of the breakdown of things. But also, I would love to hear, could you just share a little bit about what you've studied, what you found, and just any wisdom gleaned from your research that could benefit someone listening?
Yeah. So I did my dissertation on social media's effect on um, our relationships, our mental health, and our well being. Just kind of the idea of so I interviewed all these people that have been since deleted social media and just kind of explored and gleaned all this like information of what they went through, how it benefited their life, the negative and positive aspects of like going through something like that. Yeah, I'm glad this came up because this comes right back to the question you asked of how we got here as a culture of not being able to handle conflict. Because one of the things social media does is it puts something in between a relationship, you
Hmm.
know. So it's going through a filter, um, and so therefore it's even more removed to where it might be intimidating to say something face to face or to deal with something, but I'll send a message, I'll type it, or that kind of thing. And that's really, getting more passive aggressive and more confrontational, all these sort of things. But I think social media has absolutely played a part in that problem we were discussing earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so I mean, so my research, I kind of pulled the conclusion that I think, and I don't think this is a surprise to anybody, but that social media really ends up slowly, but I think it's persistent. It harms our relationships. It depletes them. It's seeing our relationships through any kind of medium is going to be affected, and I think it's watering down the substance of what those relationships are. And so here we are and that's what social media advertises, right? Let's connect you
Mm-hmm.
to the world, where I think it's a fake connection or at least a diluted connection.
Mm-hmm.
And so I find it very unhealthy and I think damaging. Um, yeah.
Is there, so say someone doesn't want to leave social media, are there parameters or boundaries or things you'd recommend putting in place so that it's a little bit more healthy, like
Sure.
the relationship to it?
Yeah. I mean, I think it comes to limiting social media. I mean, I am alarmed at how many hours a day people are just scrolling on social media. Um, find some way to limit yourself. If you want to like still connect and communicate that way, I get that. I do understand that. But be intentional about, no, I'm going to get lunch with this person. I'm going to hang out with this person. Be face to face, and not just spend time with like going to a movie, but I'm going to engage and dive, which is going to be vulnerable, is going to be risky, is going to be potentially offensive or confrontational. But we have to push ourselves into those things and not slide into the temptation of, no, I will get my relational needs met online. It's like trying to have a healthy, nutritious diet with just sugar. Um,
Hmm.
it tastes good, it kind of fulfills the need in the moment, but long term, social media interaction is not going to fulfill the desire that every one of us has to relate
Yeah.
and connect with people.
Wow. I never thought about it fulfilling a need, but like just a quick,
Yeah.
yeah, not like substantial. That's so good. Oh, this is fascinating. Um, and as we wrap up, just anything you feel prompted to share with listeners from any, like, it could be something we talked about or anything just that you found helpful in your life or any words of wisdom or, yeah, encouragement as we close.
Yeah, I mean, I think to sum up kind of all these different things we talked about, I think if you could like pull out a common theme that came out today is pursue relationship. Whether it is this mentoring idea or it is like something real and authentic beyond social media. I think that right there is kingdom,
Yeah.
and there is how discipleship happens. And I know I jumped to like mentoring idea. Discipleship does not need to be necessarily someone older. Even if it's like a peer
Yeah.
group, y'all can just pursue truth together, love and truth together. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. That's when the church is going to be the church, is when we're in relationship with each other. I don't care so much about denomination and titles and even names of church. Like I have friends that go to a different church, but we're in community. We're the kingdom.
Mhm.
I would say pursue those things, because not only are
Mhm.
they happy, they're beautiful, and they're also fun, and they're just, that's what we're here for, right?
Yes.
Connect with God and then connect with each other. So I guess that's what I would say, if that
I
makes
love
sense.
that. Oh, amazing. Thank you so much. I feel like there are just all these gold nuggets. I feel like we're deposited into people's hearts and minds today. So thank you for who you are and how you steward your life and how you love again. It was such an honor to have you here today.
Oh, thanks so much. It was fun. I'm glad to be here.